In this screencast, I'm going to show you how to work with fixed arrays in VBA. What I mean by fixed arrays is the array has a fixed size and a fixed location. So as an example, I have an array here that's fixed size and fixed location. And the example I'm going to show today will basically take this array and then move it somewhere else. So I'm going to move it over to these cells. And once we've moved it over here, we can do something else with it if we wish. If you wanted to do something cells, like an array here, if I wanted to add 5 to each of those, then I can actually use something called for each. And to do this, we dim this dummy variable c as a variant, and then we use this for each statement. So for each c in range a1 to c2, c value is equal to c value plus 5. And then we're going to do next C, and then we'll end the sub. So if I step through this, I'm going to press F8. You'll see that as we go through this and we look at our original array, it's 638417. We've added 5 to each of those elements in our array. So if you're wanting to do something just very simple like adding something or even doing an if-then statement, you can use the for each. What if I wanted to take this array in A1 to C2 and place it over in these 6 cells? So that's what I'm going to show you now. Here's the code for doing that, for taking those cells in range A1 to C2 and then putting them elsewhere. Now this would actually be very, very easy to do. You can do some simple copy-paste mechanisms, but I sort of wanted to show you this example where you can use nested for loops to make a transformation. The sub name is import array, export array, so we're going to be importing array and then exporting it into a different location. And when we're talking about fixed arrays, we know the size and we know the location. We're assuming we know that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to dim our array with size 2, 3. So we put that size 2 rows, 3 columns as our A array. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to dim I as an integer, dim j as an integer, so those are going to be counting numbers when we do these 4 next loops. And then you see that we have some 4 next loops, and what you'll notice is we have a for loop here where we're iterating through j inside another for loop where we're iterating through I. Now if we look at a flowchart for this, we start and we're going to dim the array, and we're going to dim I and j as integers, and then we enter this outer for next loop. So the index we're working with is I. I is only going from 1 to 2, and if I is not greater than 2, then we actually go into the second for loop, and that's the nested for loop. We have an index j. J will be going from 1 to 3 because we have 3 columns. During each iteration, we are going to take range a1 dot cells ij. So we're going to actually pluck a value from range A1 to C2 cells, for example 1, 1, and we're going to assign that to our local array A. So by local I mean A is our array that's defined in VBA. So we're going to go through this for each combination of I and j. So for example 1, 1 would be row 1 column 1, 1, 2 would be row 1 column 2, and so on. And then we increment j by 1 and we keep going. So this would be the first time we go through this, I will be equal to 1, and then we iterate through j equals 1, 2, 3, so we'll pick up the first row and all 3 columns. Next, I will be incremented to 2, and then we'll go through all 3 columns of the second row. And then when we're done iterating through all rows and all columns, then we're done. So again, here's the code for this, and you'll notice that we have these nested for loops. And inside the inner for loop, we're iterating through all the columns of a fixed row. And then once we are done doing that, we iterate through all the rows, which would be our index I. Another thing that I did not show on the flowchart is this line here. What we're doing here is instead of assigning a range to an array element in VBA, we're now saying we're going to assign a range to that array. So for example, if we're working with A11, we're now going to put A11 into range E1 to G2 and cell 1, 1 of that. Okay, so let's go ahead and step through this. And you can see that when I do this first one, I and j are both equal to 1. And now when I step through this next line, range E1, G1 cells, it'll be 1, 1, will equal A1, 1. So I press that, and let's go back over to Excel, and you see that cells 1, 1 of this range has been set to A1, 1, and A1, 1 has been picked up is this array that's been sort of imported from Excel. And then I can keep going and going and going and stepping through this, and you can notice the I and j down here. One thing you'll notice is that we have a 0th row and we actually have a 0th column. So this, we want this A to actually be a 2 by 3, but in fact it's a 3 by 4. And I'll show you in a minute how we can circumvent that by using a statement at the top. But let's keep going through this, F8, and you'll see the final output. Going back to Excel, we've taken that and placed it somewhere else. You cannot do this with that for each statement. And if we wanted to, we could build in something like each of these would be the previous one plus 5 or divided by 4, or you could even do if-then statements on this. So let's get back to that issue of the 0th row and the 0th column. If I write option base 1, and whenever you're working with arrays, you should get in the habit of using option base 1. Now when I go through this, you'll notice that if I open up A, we now only have, we start with row 1 and we start with column 1 instead of starting with row 0 and column 0. For a lot of things it really doesn't matter because your array is just going to be a little bit bigger. You're still working with same information, but there are some cases where you actually specifically want to do option base 1, but just to be safe, always put option base 1 when you're working with arrays.